Let's be real. The games as a service model of games has reached a natural saturation point, one fueled to its highest point in the age of lockdowns, but one that has struggled ever since as the video game industry and market continue to produce wave after wave of layoffs. And in some respects, the idea of another 10-year games as a service game feels kind of daunting. Destiny, in some respects, is both a pioneer of what a games as a service game could be, but also a coming-of-age tale for gamers around the world. There is no denying the success of this franchise, but we can't continue to ignore the many missteps that it's made along the way. Now, if you've come here for just a bash fest on Bungie or Destiny, well, you're going to be very disappointed in this video, because the real state of the game for Destiny 2, it isn't all bad, or it isn't all good, but it falls somewhere in between. From natural player fatigue to more things competing for your time than ever before, and the obvious content creator needing to make a quick buck reporting on the game's decline, I feel that it's time that we jump back into the state of the game for Destiny. This is going to be a deep dive into the numbers and what they really mean for the players. But we're also going to spend some time talking about the mistakes that Bungie has made along the way, and perhaps how they can go about turning this ship around. Because with the latest round of Bungie layoffs, things seem to be coming full circle for this long-running looter-shooter MMO. Destiny 2 still has a massive player base, and that's where, when I see Paul Tassi write, "Can Destiny 2 reverse its larger than ever player loss?" I roll my eyes a little bit, because how many times have we been here before? The cycle seemingly goes: hype up a game, play the content, stop playing the game, gripe about it because you don't want to stop playing, or you now must wait for new content, and finally new content get announced, and thus the hype cycle continues. So now let's take a look at the player numbers and break down what they really mean. And speaking of that, if you guys enjoy this kind of content, hitting that like button is a great way to let YouTube know to put more of it in your feed. You can also hit that subscribe button, but only if I earn your subscription. And if I do, sound off in the comments. I'd love to have you here. I'd love to have you back. You can also jump into the Discord, which will be the top link in the description of this video if you want to come hang out with the growing community here. But let's get to the numbers. Let's start with Destiny 2 ranking on Steam. But more than just its ranking, this is going to go up and down. And honestly, at the time of this recording, when it was number 38, that's amazing. I would love to have the 38th most played game on Steam. But what I really want to focus in on is taking a look at the hours. And you can see 37,926,969 hours. This is no small number. But if you do some quick math on this, and yes, we are using Steam charts, so as an aside, this isn't a full representation of the total community. We're going to talk about what this does represent as a heat map for the players that exist now. Because this game does run on multiple platforms and services, but these are the numbers that we have, and they are foretelling of the overall feeling within the community. So going off the hours played, and using 40 hours a month as our standard average amount of game time that players have. In fact, that's actually being really generous to Destiny. The average player usually gets around 7.2 a week. Now, when in lockdown, that jumped up to like 8.6 hours a week for gaming, but we've now since seen that shift back down into its regular number, which generally puts you around 40 hours a month. If you take that 40 hours a month, you take that into the numbers, the 37 million hours, you're going to roughly get a MAU, a monthly active user count, of just under 1 million players. Now, granted, this isn't the be all end all. That number could be a little bit higher. It could be a little bit lower depending on the average play session. I think MMOs tend to play longer. Gamers tend to enjoy this content much for longer periods of time than normal games. But at the end of the day, it's a good rough estimate of getting us where we are in the PC world. And that's at this time right now. That number goes up and it goes down, and that's what you want to see. So if we look at the trends, we can start to see some interesting patterns being formed. If we take a look at Lightfall coming out February 28th, 2023, and we look at this in terms of the numbers, the Lightfall expansion hype season kicks off December 2022, where you start to see bigger growth. Now, January didn't have as big of a growth in terms of it, but that means it still held on to the 62.8% who returned to the game in December. Then you have another 13.28% in February, and it's important to note, it came out at the end of February, and so you see the biggest jump here in terms of March at 87% for those players. And you can see the overall player number, the peak count actually did peak in February, but all being said and done, these are some really impressive numbers. And then that's when you start to see the fall off. Now, for me personally, I didn't really enjoy Lightfall. I found that it to be something incredibly frustrating, and we'll talk more about that later in this video. But you can see here, there is a pattern. Here are the first 4 months of pre-release, and then the four months after is where you start to see those drops. Now, with Final Shape, you can see here coming out June 4th, just because of its placement in the month, that does actually have an impact and changes these numbers up somewhat, but it's a very similar story. Starting 4 months back, the Season of Hype kicks off with 21%, followed by 52%, then an additional 20%, and then finally 70%. Huge jump in returning players. And you can see here, this almost hits the numbers of Lightfall, but it's still incredibly impressive with 314,000 peak players. This is healthy, but then you start to see again the decline with a 50% drop month over month, and then followed by a 16%. Here's where things get tricky though, because March was able to maintain, it does look like that it actually was growing as a game, but really in reality, it's having a very similar pattern. And yes, it has lost players. So sure, the Final Shape did see bigger drops in terms of its percentage, but this is also fueled by what's to come and the story of player fatigue. Now, Paul puts it in the article breaking down the percentages with each release. Witch Queen saw an increase of 267%, Lightfall 227%, Season of Arrivals 197, The Final Shape 157, Beyond Light 156, Season of the Haunted 104, and the 30th Anniversary Pack 103, talking about the growth. But he goes on to say, The Final Shape did in fact get the second highest concurrent player count in Destiny 2 history, just a little short of Lightfall, almost certainly due to the tech problems on launch day. But the problem is what is happening afterwards, which is amplified by the fact that the Final Shape was extremely good. Players just seem done afterward. And this is where we really kind of start to break down the future of the game. Joker puts this pretty well in response to Paul's article. What is there really to be excited about? No, really. Destiny 2 isn't like any other MMO where you have the player freedom to make your own fun. Player fun in D2 is dependent on the dev and loot cycle, and loot is pointless with no future. And by future, I mean large expansions, the focal point which also brings players back. MMOs have been in this weird spot since they've really come into their own, and Joker really knocks this one out of the park because Destiny 2 was built around the expansion hype, and thus they've already been signaling less market spend when it comes to those hype cycles. So I would venture to bet the next story you see from content creators about Destiny is that each of these new seasons isn't really hitting these massive numbers that the game used to have. Thus, the decline, Destiny's in its decline, is going to be the main narrative that kind of self-perpetuates, kind of in a way is something that I wish we could really start to understand, that what we're seeing here is more of a maturing of the player around a game. 10 years is a long time. Meaning, when some players started Destiny 2, they had all kinds of free time to play this game, and their friends were all playing this game. It was a cultural landmark, and the game has some really fun gameplay moments. It can really get you hooked in, and I think it's what you see here is also a story of gamers getting older, looking at what they want out of their life, moving into those other areas, things that take up more time and leave you with less. So you look at the past fondly when you had all this free time, but it is with rose-tinted glasses because you didn't have the life that you seek or are seeking. But does this mean that Destiny is going to end? Is this the end of the game? Well, hell no. Dead game and a dying game for me are just memes. Honestly, when people toss them around, I think I really just kind of devalue the term. Honestly, I always add "for me" to the end of any of those phrases that I see saying online because a dead dying game is really more of a personal thing. It's used in place of not knowing if the game is profitable because regardless of if it's fun, if it is costing the company money, it means that it will have a very short life, and that's what plays into the fear and also the fatigue around games as a service games. Now, as we look to the horizon, Bungie is promising that they're going to be sharing more details about its game's future very soon, but it's also true that trust in Bungie is currently at a very low point, with headlines touting that the $3.6 billion Sony buyout, basically that number being 1/3 of it, was supposed to be used for employee retention, but yet here we are with key figures leaving the company and Bungie putting so many irons in the fire, yet only ending up creating ash in the end. So what went wrong? Well, many people had their theories. Joker really called it out on the latest podcast. If you guys were able to listen to that, thank you so much. You can find it here under the Crystal Core Radio podcast. But Destiny Bulletin tweets out, Bungie CEO Pete Parsons allegedly told remaining employees that the company had kept the right people to continue to work on Destiny 2. The layoffs here were largely due to Destiny 2's underperformance over the last year and lower than expected pre-orders for the final shape. Again, if we pull up the numbers themselves, you can see the final shape brought in plenty of players. It also seemed to let them go, and so based off of that, it seems like these layoffs were obviously planned prior to the release of the expansion, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, a shrewd business move. I'm not giving them credit. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying, yeah, that seems to be the nature of it. At least that seems to be the story of 2024. But that's just only part of it. There's also something happening behind the scenes, and that's Gamergate 2. If you guys haven't been following, this has actually been going on for a while, and my own concern with Gamergate 2 is that despite everything, we've never seen Sweet Baby Inc. even remotely apologize for calling for that harassment and suspension campaign against Cabrutus. Now, all that being said, I think that's what I want. And the fact is that they and people like Paul Tassi and social media have not even acknowledged that part of the story, virtue signaling and so much more. And Grums puts it this way: Bungie layoffs were self-inflicted. A lot of Destiny players moved on to the First Descendant, which currently has double the number of players online on PC alone. Bungie celebrated Pride and called critics bigots. First Descendant celebrates Summer instead. Gamers are fed up with the constant woke signaling that these companies who only did this stuff to get access to cheap money to fund their projects that weren't making much or any money. So many of the figures who promoted these theologies into the gaming public have found themselves a part of various rounds of layoffs, and not just with Bungie, but the whole entertainment industry as a whole. And it kind of feels like a meme of go woke, go broke, but that is screaming very loudly right now. However, this isn't total victory for gamers, as much of this will just get rebranded into something that makes it sound like a bigot for calling it out because of its inherent racism and its own bigotry. However, this isn't a total victory for gamers, as much of this DEI is going to get rebranded into something that makes you sound like a bigot for just calling it out for its inherent racism and its own self-bigotry in the first place. Honestly, as a father, all the gaslighting that has been going on online really does start to piss me off, but it isn't just with the woke stuff. Reforged Gaming is an important part of the Destiny 2 story and the problem of cancel culture, one of which Bungie took full part in, and honestly owes him a huge apology. Quietly firing all the people really doesn't do it justice, but he had this to say. Getting a handful of comments like this today on my video about the Bungie layoffs, it really means more than you know.
Oh, do you think they would just ban me from everything? I don't think so, Mike. I don't think so. No. I don't think, especially with the leaders that left, I think I'm actually safer than I've ever been. Like, I'm safer than I've ever been. We would never take this risk, but I honestly don't think anything would happen if I just started booting up and playing and covering the game. I really don't. I think the people that pulled some of those levers and pushed some of those buttons, I think they're gone. I'm not going to do that because I don't care to, but I don't think we would need to worry about like, yeah, you're not going to be able to play Marathon, Lono. No, I think those people are gone, like quite literally. Not to reopen a long time discussion, but they took away from you and all of us a community that you built that was a home for a good group of people. I'm happy that you never gave up. Your story is inspirational. I mean, I appreciate that franchise. I've talked about that recently, about how, You know, I don't think anybody really understood the ramifications of what they were doing, and even now they try to downplay it. You know, there was a clip of one of the dudes, one of the ringleader dudes, saying that what happened wasn't because of what I was accused of, it was because of how I responded, which is just a very convenient form of like revisionist history. You know, he forgets that he told the world I needed to find a new career, and that they campaigned for me to lose everything, and that they painted a picture of me that wasn't true, and then they scrubbed their timelines when their claims were proven false because they were scared about the legal ramifications of having a disregard for the truth, a reckless disregard for the truth. So like they ducked, covered, and ran, and have now, you know, hid everything. And then to come out now this many years later and be like, yeah, well, that only happened to him because of the way he responded. Again, that's just a very convenient revisionist form of history to act like you weren't pushing for utter destruction, because you were. And a lot of people don't understand that the reason I pushed back was because I couldn't see anything that was said about me. Everybody blocked me. It was like, well, why'd you apologize? And it's like, because I saw something very benign stated. I knew that at that point in my life, I would go to these events and act uncontrolled, and I would say inappropriate things. So I owned that, because I owned that in my therapy. I owned that in my own personal life. So I owned it. And then I realized, oh, wait, people think I'm apologizing for stuff that I didn't even see. Nobody knows that. Very few people know that. They don't understand the timeline.
Now, if you guys want more information about the Lono story, check out the upper echelon coverage of it. It's a very detailed breakdown of the players that really orchestrated this entire cancellation campaign. And still to this day, I'll still have people tell me they've unsubbed from me because my refusal to accept things as they're just stated online. I require evidence. I need a lot of detail about what is going on before essentially we just start trying to ruin people's lives. I'm not one with the mob. And that's usually, honestly, when people say they unsubscribed, there's a little bit of relief in me, because honestly, if you don't require evidence, if you don't care what truth is, well, I think you're going to find other content creators better for your liking. We're only going to end up butting heads along the way. But beyond the social justice, beyond the Me Too, beyond the virtual signaling for internet points, Bungie has its work cut out for it. Is the game in a bad spot? Not really. The goal of this game is to make money for Sony, and it's got the gameplay that you will feel the instant you come back and play it. What will remain to be seen is really what comes next. We got the disappointing news that Bungie 3 isn't currently in development, and a lot of these random projects at Bungie got shut down. So now it looks like the whole focus is going to be on Marathon. And the real story of Destiny 2 is that it's a 10-year-old game when you count the original Destiny and the formula. And there isn't anything wrong with taking breaks or returning to the game or calling it out for its BS. I feel more than anything the story of Destiny 2 is the story of us growing up as gamers who had once a lot of free time and no responsibility. But as we get older and older, alongside the game, and we're looking and we're leaning for these bigger experiences in life, that things that we want to devote our life to, and that just isn't one single game. And obviously, most of us then move on from there. What I'm going to be watching for with Destiny and its future is really, how does this business model change going forward? With no yearly expansion to drive players back into this season of hype, do we see that players will forget about it in favor of new games? Right now, the industry is at an inflection point. Lots of changes are being made, and there's a lot just around the corner. Hopefully, it's a future about just making fun games that people want to play, rather than trying to capture lightning in a bottle and keep players glued to that for over a decade. I think if you shoot for that, you might as well shoot yourself in the foot, because those games already exist, and you're going to have to do everything that they do and more in order to make people really want to make that switch. And saying that your game will get good and get all the content after years of it being released, I don't think players really have that attention or that hunger for that time span anymore. But that's where we're going to set this down and find other things to play and enjoy. Personally, I highly recommend checking out No Rest for the Wicked. It is a fun game, and one that it's going to be around for a very long time. I don't know when I'm going to get around to playing the final shape. Too many real life things fighting for that time right now. And a real life is something that I hope that everyone out there gets the chance to experience too. As I like to do, we wrap up these videos with a message of hope. This is for all of you out there like me who struggle with life, because that is probably the thing that unites us more than we know. Suffering is the great glue that binds humanity together. First and foremost, don't put your value in any game or community that you're a part of. I want you to focus in on your mental health, your own successes, and that also means your physical health as well, as your mental and your physical health tend to be linked in some mysterious way. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to be called to be successful, mind you. You're just called to try. So give this life a shot. And if you don't knock it out of the park on your first at bat, keep getting up to the plate and taking those swings. Everyone who has ever achieved anything has struck out numerous times along the way. And that brings me to the real point. I don't know if you've ever heard this expression, but comparison is the thief of joy. So when you see someone who is quote unquote successful and you wish that you were them, go find out what they're doing to be a success. And I bet you're going to find that it sounds a lot like hard work, because it is. But stop comparing yourself to them. Don't look at their social numbers and all these things wishing that that was you. Go out and figure out how to make that happen. And honestly, what I find is that ask questions and you're going to get some answers. Some people are going to be stingy, and those aren't people you want to hang out with. Find people that will be open with knowledge and information about their struggles and things that they've done in life. Those are true people that you want to be around. Those are the true successes, not the ones who failed, because we all fail. The ones who are open and willing to share that journey to make it a little bit easier for the next generation. But don't be afraid of hard work. You actually were made for hard work. That's who you are, even if you don't believe it yet. It all starts with the idea of believing that you can. I want you to work on that. Think of the little engine that could. It's a profound tale. I read it to my kids all the time. I want you to keep that book and that motto in the back of your mind. I think I can. I think I can. I think I can. Your brain is wired to lie to you. It's going to tell you that you're not good enough, smart enough, good looking enough, whatever it is, that you're not worthy of love. And that's just nonsense. If you're not happy with your position in life, or if any of those things that I listed just now you feel apply to you, guess what? You can change it all. You can change it all. Just don't give up and don't give in to the darkness, because you're worth living for, and the world actually needs you to be you. As always, hopefully that was a good pick-me-up in your daily feed. That being said, is that if you are truly struggling out there, I highly recommend therapy. It is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. Cognitive behavioral therapy is what I personally use, and it is a very good tool in your arsenal, because like I said, our brains can lie to us. So it gives you the ability to break down if your brain is lying to you, or if there is something that you need to change. And it can be as simple as making the bed, or it can be as complex as going out there and doing something crazy that only a handful of people do. Thinking professional athletes and those big content creators, for example. Anyway, guys, I just want to thank you so much for giving me your time today and checking out this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got something good in the message of hope. I want to say a special shout out to my members here who keep the channel rocking and rolling and keeping it funded, because that's where the majority of the money that I make on YouTube helps cover the cost of all the stuff that I do to make YouTube content. It's a fun hobby. This is a fun hobby, and I appreciate my members who go above and beyond. And also, if you guys do want to support the channel, but I get it, financials don't make sense, that like button is a great and free way of supporting the channel and helping it grow. Sound off in the comments if you have any thoughts. I'd love to hear them, especially about anything that we talked about today. And I hope that I will see you guys in my next video. But until then, take care.